Hello, my name's Kayla, this is Cinnamon, Peaches, and Sage, and today I'm going to be telling you about my playthrough team for the Indigo Disk, as well as going through some of the playthrough teams that you submitted. Was your team featured? Keep watching to find out. I'm going to start off by going through my team. So normally when I play a Pokemon game, I try to use new Pokemon, but since it's the DLC and I've played every Pokemon game that has existed basically ever, there aren't that many Pokemon that I haven't used before. Most of the Pokemon have been on playthrough teams of mine already, and I'm not entirely sure when we're going to be able to get certain new Pokemon. Because of this, I was really unsure about who I wanted on my Indigo Disk team. Then one day I was looking at my darling mascots and I decided, wow, it would be really fun if I could do a playthrough with my actual mascots on my team. So I transferred these three up to Pokemon Violet, got them competitively trained, along with three other Pokemon that are near and dear to my heart. The reason I'm competitively training them is that this DLC is supposed to be very challenging and include a lot of double battle. While I want to play with some of my favorites, I don't want them to get wrecked. Let's start off with my original channel mascot, Cinnamon the Scorbunny. This Cinderace evolved from my original Scorbunny from Pokemon Shield, and you can actually see me play with this Pokemon in my playthrough video. I kept this Pokemon's Tera type Fire because it has the ability Libero, so I want it to be able to switch back to Fire type if it needs to. I also gave it a Life Orb because that makes it super powerful and it has enough HP to make that work. Basically, I anticipate this Pokemon having to fight a lot of fairy types because with my favorite Pokemon, I don't have a lot of coverage for fairies. So I imagine Cinnamon is probably going to use Iron Head a lot, but then be able to Tera type back to Fire. Next up, we have Peaches the Pichu, which is evolved into a Raichu. I got this Pichu in Pokemon Legends Arceus when I randomly happened to run into it, and it was so cute that I decided to keep it on my team. Like in PLA, the animations are just so adorable. One thing that I think people are missing about Raichu is that it has the hidden ability Lightning Rod, which draws in electric type attacks without it taking damage from them. This becomes extra crazy with Tera types because you can terrestrialize to something that would be weak to electric and it no longer takes damage from electric moves. I gave Peaches the Tera type Flying because then it wouldn't be hit by ground type attacks, which is its usual weakness. It also has the move Surf to potentially take out ground type. I gave it Tera Blast because Raichu doesn't have any flying type moves, so it gives it a stab move for when it's terrestrialized. Additionally, I gave it Nasty Plot, so it can get really crazy. For an item, I gave it a Mago Berry, which will allow it to heal some HP. Moving on, we have Sage the Sprigatito, which is now a Meowscarada. Similar to my Cinderace, Meowscarada's ability allows it to change type to the move that's used first. Because of this, I kept its Tera type Grass, allowing it to switch back into Grass typing if it needs to. Normally, I would also give a Meowscarada Life Orb, but I'm trying not to duplicate items similar to how we would in competitive. Because of this, I gave my Meowscarada a Focus Sash. I don't know how useful that is, and I might change it out eventually. I thought about giving it a choice item, but that kind of makes its move U-turn less useful. So I think I'm just gonna have to see how this one plays out. I've had a couple people question why I have a Cantonian Golem on my team, and this one is very much for the nostalgia. Back in Pokemon Crystal, I decided to start with the Chikorita, and anyone who's ever played the Gen 2 games knows that Chikorita kind of struggles. Like the first gym is flying type, and Chikorita just gets wrecked. I was pretty young when I played Pokemon Crystal, and I was used to just having my starter Pokemon be basically my only Pokemon, and that didn't really work well against Faulkner. Faulkner managed to defeat every single one of my Pokemon except my Geodude. My little level 2 Geodude was able to defeat both of Faulkner's Pokemon, preventing me from losing for the first time in my life. I nicknamed this Geodude Golly, and it basically replaced my starter in that game. It was the first Pokemon I ever got to level 100. Unfortunately, the battery in my copy of Crystal died, so this isn't my original Golly, but in pretty much every single game, I recreate her. Golly has the moves Earthquake, Brick Break, Double Edge, and Stone Edge. Golly has the ability Sturdy, so she can't be knocked out in one hit as long as her HP is full. To help keep her HP full, I gave her the item Shell Bell. I also gave her the Tera type Fighting to allow for Stab with Brick Break. I don't have any Fighting type Pokemon on my team, and since some Pokemon are only weak to Fighting, I felt like I needed that extra power. Next, we have one of my favorite Pokemon ever, Lady the Melodic. Lady is from my copy of Alpha Sapphire. I competitively trained her there and moved her into this game. I love the lore of Melodic, with it starting out as a Feebas, but then you convince it that it is beautiful, and then it evolves into Melodic, and then it has the ability competitive, so if you try to bring it down, it just brings itself back up. Like, amazing. Gotta love when lore and mechanics match up like that. Not to mention, I was bullied really bad as a kid, so personally, I just really relate to this Pokemon. Lady has the moves Scald, Ice Beam, Recover, and Dragon Pulse. I gave her the Tera-type Dragon because it resists a lot of water's weaknesses, as well as gives her Stab for her Dragon-type move. I gave her the item Leftovers because Melodic has really good bulk. Last but not least, we have Tiny the Sylveon. If you haven't watched the last episode of my playthrough of Pokemon Legends Arceus, you really should, because Tiny is absolutely amazing in that. Tiny started out as this very, very small male Eevee that I found in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Prior to Pokemon Legends Arceus, sizes weren't as big of a thing. Like, you couldn't see them visually the way that you do now. And so when I ran across this tiny, adorable Eevee, I was just like, yes, this is going on my team. I'd never had a Sylveon on my team before, but I knew that they were pretty good, and wow, did Tiny impress. Pokemon in PLA didn't have abilities. Pixelate causes normal type moves to be fairy type and also boost their power. So while it looks like Tiny has no fairy type moves, Quick Attack and Hyper Voice actually become fairy type. Quick Attack keeping the priority, getting more power, and being fairy type. Terrifying. I also gave him Psychic and Shadow Ball, but I'm debating about changing one of these moves out. Especially since Tiny has a Tera-type Fire, this protects him from Steel-type Pokemon, but it would be really nice to have a Stab Fire move to use against these Steel-types. Tiny is also wearing an Assault Vest, partly because it's hilarious to picture a Sylveon in an Assault Vest, but also it is a good and appropriate item. That's the team that I plan to use the Indigo Disk, but what about everyone else? Are the Pokemon I chose very common, very uncommon, or somewhere in between? Based on the data I gathered, the most common Pokemon that people are planning to use in the DLC are Ogerpon, Skeledirge, Archaludon, and Meowscarada. Other popular Pokemon are Dipplin in its evolution, Hisuian Arcanine, Annihilate, and Reuniclus. The only one of these that's a surprise for me is Reuniclus. I really didn't expect to see this Pokemon as people's favorites. I mean, I really like Reuniclus, but I didn't know it was so popular with everyone else. Another interesting thing from the data is that 1/3 of all Pokemon selected were unique to an individual person. That means that a lot of people are going to have unique playthrough teams. Next, I'm going to go through some of the playthrough teams that you submitted. One thing to keep in mind is that unlike competitive teams where certain Pokemon may be better than others, for a playthrough team, you can play with whoever you want. Just because most people are using a specific Pokemon doesn't make your team less cool. Of all the people who submitted teams on Twitter, the person with the most common team by the numbers is Leland Leopard. Leland is planning to use a Meowscarada, an Ogerpon, Hisuian Arcanine, Metagross, Reuniclus, and Archaludon. Another numerically common team was submitted by Pharaoh on the Track. Pharaoh on the Track's planned team is Skeledirge, Miraidon, Torterra, Hisuian Arcanine, Ogerpon, and another Miraidon. What's interesting about this team though is that it includes both Miraidon. Plus, this is the only person who included Torterra. This just goes to show that even if your team is statistically more common, it doesn't mean your team isn't unique. I think one of the coolest things about this new DLC and people's playthrough of it is that there are so many options for what Pokemon you can use. So seeing the diversity of teams even when you're using Pokemon that most people are using is really cool. Blaze Incineroar is planning to use Skeledirge, Palafin, Armarouge, Annihilate, Baxcalibur, and Dipplin. I was kind of surprised that more people aren't using Palafin. I feel like with double battles, it's gonna be a really good Pokemon. Not to mention that pairing it with some of the Pokemon that Blaze has should allow it to switch in and out pretty easily, getting its ability to activate. Elite Trainer Kenway submitted an interesting team. There's Charizard, Annihilate, Skeledirge, Koraidon, Umbreon, and Kilowattrel. This is a very common thing I saw in the data where people would use 1 or 2 Pokemon that a lot of people were using, but most of their team was pretty unique. Even my partner, whose gamer tag is Dr. Cheese McCheese, I know, he comes up with the best names. The squad he plans to use includes Rayquaza, Reshiram, Zekrom, Ogerpon, Armarouge, and Meowscarada. Scarlet is his first Pokemon game, so he's really excited to see legendaries from other regions. Hopefully we're able to get them early enough to put them on our playthrough team. That was the thing I noticed as well. A lot of people are more willing to put legendary Pokemon on their teams for this DLC than they typically are for a playthrough. I think that's because Scarlet and Violet did a pretty good job of giving legendary Pokemon personality rather than just making them prizes to be won. Now we're starting to get into some of the more uncommon teams. Easy Nathan submitted a team of Hisuian Zoroark, Mienshao, Toxtricity, Dipplin, Melmetal, and Kingdra. I was really surprised that only 2 people are using the Hisuian Zoroark line considering its popularity in PLA. But I think that just goes to show how many amazing Pokemon there are in these games. In terms of how uncommon it is to have Pokemon on a team, my team falls into this orange category as well. I wasn't surprised that I'm the only person who plans to have Raichu on their team. I mean, not a lot of people are super big fans of the mascot since it's pushed on us so much, but I was really surprised that I'm the only person who plans to have Cinderace. Cinderace is a really good and fun Pokemon, especially with its abilities, so I'm surprised that we're not seeing it more. Now we're getting into some of the rarest teams submitted. In my opinion, these teams are so cool, and I'm really excited to talk about them. Armando is going with a fairy team with Clefable, Alchemy, Whimsicott, Primarina, Granville, and Comfey. I did a mono steel type run for BDSP. It makes it more challenging and it's really fun, so I'm really excited for this person and their adventure. Lord Godwin's team was also very unique, with it being one of only 2 teams to have Quaquaval. Based on the data, Quaquaval is definitely the least favorite starter of this generation. Lord Godwin also has Grafaiai, Bramblegast, Rabsca, Bombardier, and Great Tusk. Last but certainly not least, we have Pre-Law Rock 6, who is going with their Unova team from the Gen 5 game. There's Samurott, Zebstrika, Leavanny, Crocodile, Haxorus, and Chandelure. It's so interesting to me to use a Unova team at Blueberry Academy, which is in Unova. What team are you planning on using in the Indigo Disk? And why did you pick those Pokemon? Let me know in the comments. I'll be filming my playthrough of the Indigo Disk and posting it here on this channel, so if you're not subscribed, you should really think about doing that. If you enjoyed this discussion, you should also consider joining my Discord, Capsule Monsters. It is a very super awesome, friendly place where we talk about Pokemon and Pokemon theories and strategy and all sorts of things. I hope you have a great day or night, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!